don't go anywhere. We don't do anything that we aren't looking for this guy.
We have a hole in our family now.
There are days that I would just rather not be here, have it go away.
In February 2017, two teenage girls named Abigail Williams and Liberty German vanished while walking along a trail near Delphi, Indiana. Their bodies were discovered a short time later, but despite extensive investigations, the case quickly went cold. Leads dried up, and the killer remained unidentified for years, which left the community searching for answers.
We're a small community, and when something like this happens, you feel like you need to do something. So, with the people being friends and neighbors, we wanted to raise some money for whatever.
But then, in 2022, a shocking breakthrough came, and new evidence would finally reveal a lead that had been overlooked for years. So, who was behind these senseless murders, and why did it take so long to reveal the truth? Let's dive into the case.
Obviously, we haven't because no one's incarcerated yet. No one's being held accountable.
On February 13th, 2017, Abigail Williams, who was 13, and Liberty German, who was 14, were excited to spend the day together. The two best friends had made plans to hike on the Monon High Bridge Trail, which is a scenic route in the Delphi Historic Trail system. It is an old railroad bridge that has become a popular spot for hikers and photographers alike. Though it is a beautiful location, it is somewhat deserted. It is surrounded by thick woods and the creek's banks and feels serene and isolated. That afternoon, Liberty's older sister, Kelsey German, dropped the girls off at the trailhead around 1:35 p.m.
Minute idea for the girls to go to the High Bridge. A High Bridge is a part of our trail system that a lot of people go and they spend time there. That's where we would go to take pictures. We would go there just to see the beautiful scenery.
Kelsey was scheduled to pick them up later, around 3:15 p.m. at a nearby location. The girls were excited and prepared with their phones to document their adventure, but they had no idea that their innocent plans would soon take a dark turn.
Had the day off and they knew that they wanted to do something, but they didn't know what, whether it was stay home or go with me somewhere. They didn't know.
Kelsey left the girls to enjoy their hike and ran a few tasks, and she was confident that the girls would be fine. The plan was simple: to hike the bridge, take some photos, and then head back to meet Kelsey at the designated time. The Monon High Bridge was a relatively short walk, so it was assumed that the girls would be back well before Kelsey was expected to pick them up.
That day, I dropped the girls off at around 1:35. I watched Libby walk away after telling her I loved her. She said it back, and I made sure they both had sweatshirts, so they continued to walk.
At 2:07 p.m., Liberty German shared a photo on social media and showed her best friend, Abigail, who was walking along the bridge. The image, which would later become one of the most haunting pieces of evidence in the case, captured Abby mid-step as she walked across the old and narrow bridge. Her long hair flowed behind her, which was framed by the scenic winter landscape. Liberty's photo was a simple snapshot of the two friends enjoying the outdoors, but it would be the last trace of the girls. After posting the photo, they were never heard from again. At 3:15 p.m., when Kelsey arrived at the meeting spot, she found no sign of the girls. As the minutes stretched into hours and there was still no word from Abby and Libby, Kelsey began to panic. She had expected to see them walking toward her, but the area remained empty instead.
And the first thing she said was, "Have you heard from Libby?" And that was the hardest moment, I think, of that particular day. After we heard, I called my work and told them I was going to help search for my sister.
By 5:30 p.m., as the sun began to set and the girls had still not appeared, Kelsey contacted the Carroll County Sheriff's Department. She reported that her sister and friend were missing.
I got in my car and drove to High Bridge. At that moment, I called my grandma and told her I was on my way. I could hear the scaredness in her voice, the amount of hurt that she was feeling just knowing that something was wrong.
At this point, authorities did not immediately suspect foul play. Missing person cases involving children were common, and there was a belief that the girls had either gotten lost or wandered off the trail. Deputies quickly mobilized to search the Monon High Bridge Trail and surrounding areas. Search teams scoured the woods and hoped to find the girls before darkness fell. Unfortunately, as the hours wore on and the search continued, there was still no sign of the two friends. As night descended on Delphi, the situation became more critical. The next morning, February 14th, 2017, the search efforts were intensified. It was clear by now that the disappearance of girls was more than just a case of getting lost. They had been gone for almost 24 hours, and the situation was becoming increasingly terrible.
A kid, he and his buddies played in here for all the time. I mean, he was born here. That was a different time, though.
At around noon on February 14th, just one day after they had gone missing, the bodies of Abigail Williams and Liberty German were discovered.
We are investigating this as a crime scene. We suspect foul play. We have not made positive identification of the two bodies.
They were found about half a mile east of the Monon High Bridge, on the north bank of Deer Creek, near an area that was part of the broader trail system.
We are investigating this as a crime scene. We suspect foul play. We have not made positive identification of the two bodies.
The discovery of the bodies was a devastating turning point in the investigation. By this point, it was evident that foul play was involved. The girls had been brutally murdered, and the investigation quickly shifted from a missing persons case to a full-blown homicide investigation. The question on everyone's mind was, who could have done such a horrible thing, and why?
We've been able to identify almost everybody else that's been on that trail, and this gentleman has not been identified, and we want to know what he saw, what he might have seen on the trail. Did he see somebody else that maybe some of the others didn't see?
The news of the bodies being found quickly spread through Delphi and left the community in shock. People were stunned, and many questions arose about the crime and who might be responsible. The search for answers grew urgent as the victims' families were heartbroken and worried and desperately looking for closure. The small town of Delphi was now at the center of a national tragedy, which was once peaceful and close-knit.
Our lives for 5.5 years have been in a search mode. And that's what we've done. And you get up and it's like, oh, we're not doing that anymore.
In the initial days following the disappearance of Abigail Williams and Liberty German, authorities remained reserved about the details of the crime and hoped to preserve the integrity of the investigation. However, as the search for answers intensified, it became clear that solving this case was not going to be easy. The public's demand for information was growing because many people were eager to know the answers. A significant break in the case came on February 15, 2017, when Indiana State Police released a grainy photograph taken from Liberty's phone. The image showed a man walking on the Monon High Bridge Trail where the girls were last seen. The man appeared to be a Caucasian male with his hands in his pockets and his head lowered, almost as if he was trying to remain unnoticed. Could this man, soon known as the Bridge Guy, really be the key to solving the double homicide? Authorities quickly named him the primary suspect, but what was his connection to the tragic events?
To the murderer. I believe you have just a little bit of a conscience left.
Investigators praised Liberty German for her quick thinking in recording the exchange, and despite the life-threatening danger she was in at that moment. The release of the photo and audio was disturbing, which gave both the public and investigators a rare look into the crime. As the case gained more attention, the reward for information rose to $41,000. Authorities urged the public to help, and the search for the man in the photo became more intense.
On 2 counts of murder is sure a major step in leading to the conclusion of this long-term and complex investigation.
Despite the release of the photo and the audio, the investigation was still at a standstill. As law enforcement struggled to make progress, the search for the killer continued. On July 17, 2017, Indiana State Police released a composite sketch of the suspect, which was created from the accounts of a hiker who had reportedly seen a man matching the description of the bridge guy on the day of the disappearance of girls. This sketch provided the public with a clearer image of the suspect, but unfortunately, it still did not lead to any solid clues.
To the killer, who may be in this room, we believe you are hiding in plain sight. For more than 2 years, you never thought we would shift gears to a different investigative strategy, but we have. We likely have interviewed you.
On April 22, 2019, nearly 2 years after the murders, Indiana State Police released an updated sketch of the suspect, which hoped to restart the investigation. Along with the new sketch, authorities advised the public to review the photo, video, and audio recordings more carefully.
Naomi, put simply, investigators are trying to put a name with that face. They believe this individual is at one of the individuals who participated in the murders. They believe this individual in the artist's sketch is the same man in that fuzzy photograph.
Investigators believed the suspect was likely someone familiar with the Delphi area, such as a local resident, a worker, or a regular visitor.
It's basically just a clear picture of his face compared to what you saw down below. We've got the information out there, the pictures out there. Now we got this composite that we feel that is the same. We feel it is the same person, and we just want to make sure that people realize that that picture is this person. We're hoping.
The police also issued a call for help in identifying a vehicle that had been seen parked in a suspicious manner near the Hoosier Heartland Highway on the day of the murders. Authorities speculated that this vehicle might have been connected to the crime in some way. Despite all the efforts, the case was still unsolved, and the killer remained free. How long could the Delphi community live in fear, and how much longer could Abby and Libby's families endure the pain of not knowing who did this? With each passing year, the search for answers became even more urgent, but authorities were determined to bring justice to the girls.
And we have to count on that every day, that he's going to give us the strength to make it through another day. And he has. Tough, but he has. If you didn't have faith, you would have nothing.
Finally, in September 2022, a crucial breakthrough occurred when investigators reviewed a misfiled tip that had been overlooked. A volunteer file clerk had discovered the mistake, which led authorities to revisit the information.
We believe you are hiding in plain sight. For more than 2 years, you never thought we would shift gears to a different investigative strategy, but we have.
The tip had been filed by none other than Richard Allen, who had reported being on the Monon High Bridge Trail on the same day the girls were murdered. Allen mentioned that he had seen Abigail and Liberty walking on the trail, but nothing in his initial statement raised suspicion at the time. However, upon further investigation, it became clear that this tip would later play a pivotal role in the case. After months of painstaking investigation, on October 26, 2022, Richard Allen was arrested. The arrest came after law enforcement pieced together multiple disturbing clues that linked Allen to the murders.
Where he made these so-called incriminating statements or confessions. Some people said that for all we know, they may have been statements that were overheard by fellow inmates. They may have come from jailhouse informants.
Following his arrest, Allen initially told authorities he had been at his mother's house in Peru on the day of the murders. He explained that while his wife was working, he left the house at around 11:15 a.m. and headed toward the Monon High Bridge Trail. Alan claimed he saw two girls, believed to be Williams and German, who were walking on the trail but didn't notice anyone else. According to his statement, he then walked along the trail while checking his phone to watch stock updates. After a short time, Alan said he couldn't find his black 2016 Ford Focus SE parked on the trail property. He eventually located the vehicle and returned to his mother's home. Later, Alan mentioned to his wife that he had been on the trail that day, which led her to inform him that the police were asking for information. Alan then went to the sheriff's office to speak with a Department of Natural Resources officer in the days following the disappearance of the girls.
The subject of my investigation is the Delphi murders, a crime that broke the hearts of a community that turned into an investigation cloaked in secrecy and then turned into a trial with limited public access.
Interestingly, Richard Allen had already been interviewed by police shortly after the murders. In his initial statement in 2017, he claimed that he had been on the Monon High Bridge Trail that afternoon and spent about 2 hours there. According to the affidavit, Allen stated that he had been alone and was simply watching fish on the bridge. At the time, his statement seemed harmless, but it now appeared to be part of a pattern of deceptive behavior.
Steve Mullen, an investigator for the state, said, "We're not mad at you, we're not upset with you, we're just trying to get to the truth." Richard Allen said, "I think we're done." He said, "It's not me, you're not going to convince me it's me, I had nothing to do with those murders."
When Allen was re-interviewed in October 2022, he reiterated that he had been on the bridge that day and was wearing jeans and either a black or blue jacket. He maintained that he had gone to the bridge to observe wildlife, but investigators were now skeptical of his explanation.
Then, last month on October 13th, investigators interviewed Allen again. According to the PC, Allen again said he was on the Monon High Bridge to watch the fish. He said he parked his car on the side of an old building and was wearing blue jeans and a blue or black Carhartt jacket with a hood.
As the investigation progressed, the evidence against Allen became clearer, which included forensic clues and eyewitness accounts. This pointed to his role in the murders of Abigail and Liberty, and it brought the case closer to a resolution. Allen pleaded not guilty and maintained his innocence.
Allen maintained his innocence in his police interviews with investigators before his arrest.
The arrest shocked the Delphi community, as many struggled to believe someone so ordinary could be involved in such a crime. On November 29, 2022, Judge Francis Gull unsealed the probable cause affidavit, which revealed critical evidence including footage from Liberty's phone. The video showed a man approaching the girls and ordering them to go down the hill. This, along with a still image, helped identify Allen as the prime suspect. Further evidence strengthened the case. Investigators found a .40 caliber unspent bullet near the victims' bodies, matching a gun owned by Allen. A witness also reported seeing a man covered in mud and blood, wearing a blue jacket and jeans, which matched Allen's appearance.
Usually made out of brass, in this case nickel-plated brass, and then the bullet is actually the projectile here that's coated in a copper alloy, but that's the bullet, that's the projectile that travels downrange and hits your target or whatever it is that you're shooting at.
Additionally, a tip about a suspicious vehicle near the crime scene led investigators to connect it to a car Allen owned in 2017, further linking him to the area around the time of the murders. Richard Matthew Allen was born around 1971 or 1972 in Mexico, Indiana. He grew up in nearby Denver and attended North Miami Middle High School, where he was active in sports, particularly football and track and field. After graduating in 1991, Allen went on to study accounting at Ivy Tech Community College. He also served briefly in both the U.S. Army and the National Guard. Later, he married and had 2 children. Allen's work history included a 10-year tenure as a store manager at a Walmart in Logansport from 2003 to 2013. He then worked at 2 CVS pharmacy locations before getting his pharmacy technician license in February 2018, which was one in Peru and the other in Delphi. Alan moved to Delphi from Mexico in December 2006. Nearly 11 years later, he became a suspect in the tragic deaths of Abigail Williams and Liberty German. On December 2, 2022, Judge Francis Gull issued a gag order and restricted public commentary until January 2023.
Before the defense for Richard Allen recused himself or withdrew, defense attorney Andrew Baldwin hired an attorney himself who filed a motion talking about possible disqualification or sanctions.
His trial was initially set for March 2023, but was delayed to allow the defense more time to review evidence, and 2 public defenders were appointed to represent him. Allen's defense team then filed a motion to move the trial due to media bias. In October 2023, the judge removed Allen's attorneys for leaking crime scene photos, but the Indiana Supreme Court later restored them. The trial began in October 2024. The prosecution presented details of the murders, which revealed both girls had their throats slit. An unspent .40 caliber bullet found between their bodies matched Allen's gun. Prosecutors also argued that Allen confessed to the murders over 60 times to his family. Moreover, he was the bridge guy seen in the video, with voice analysis, which again linked him to the suspect. In defense, Allen's attorneys called a psychologist who diagnosed him with serious mental illness, including depression and anxiety. Allen himself claimed he initially intended to sexually assault the girls, but killed them by slitting their throats when he saw a van nearby.
After he was put behind bars awaiting trial, he started to confess. And the prosecution focused on this today in court. Those confessions are going to be a big problem for the defense if the prosecution is correct and Allen says things only the killer.
A neuropsychologist hired by the defense argued Allen was under significant work-related stress at the time. The trial lasted several weeks, with the jury kept in isolation. He is 52 years old now and finally reached a verdict on November 11, 2024, when a jury convicted him on all 2 counts after 17 days of testimony. He is set to be sentenced on December 20, 2024, and faces up to 130 years in prison. Throughout the trial, Allen's defense team claims he is innocent. They suggest that the murders are not his doing, but the work of a pagan white nationalist cult, specifically a group of Odinists who killed the girls as part of a ritualistic sacrifice. This theory, presented in sensational court documents, was rejected by the judge, and he banned the defense from mentioning it during the trial. Despite the defense's claims, the jury finds Allen guilty. After more than 7 years of uncertainty, though the case remains controversial, the families of Abby and Libby finally get some closure. Allen's defense still argues his innocence and mentions a lack of physical evidence, but the jury's decision offers some peace to the victims' families, even as questions about his guilt remain.
They've concluded that it's permissible. It's permissible as an investigative technique. The idea is if someone is truly guilty, they're not going to, or truly innocent on the other hand,